boys and girls. So I received a few questions recently about drugs and drug use, and particularly in reference to my comments on another video that drugs are weakness. Drugs are weakness is a tongue-in-cheek statement that I make to my friends who are weed smokers, to mock them, to annoy them. This is something I like to do because there is a fairly strong strain of sadism within my personality. I love winding people up. It's the same kind of puerile, asinine pleasure I get from mocking my friends who do CrossFit. And the reason is when somebody is slightly insecure about something that they do, if you take the piss out of them for it, they get defensive and they get wound up. So people say, well, what do you really think about drugs? Are you saying like medicine is weakness as well? And I'm like, no, I'm English. We don't typically call medicine drugs. Not typically, that's more of a, it is becoming more common, but as we slowly Americanise. But I wouldn't refer to medicine as drugs. I'd usually call it medicine. What about alcohol, coffee and nicotine? Those are drugs. 100% they're drugs. Absolutely they're drugs. My view of drugs is pretty broad. I include, as some nutritionalists do, food as a drug because it's a substance that you ingest that alters your physiological and emotional state. I was a smoker. I gave it up. I do occasionally drink alcohol. I drink coffee pretty much every day. So you then say, well, is that weakness? Yes. Why? Because it's self-indulgence. I really don't need it. I drink coffee and I tell myself, oh, I need the kick to get myself going so I can start work. But that's actually not true. I don't need that. And if I needed a kick, I could just get out of bed and go for a run. And that would wake me up way more than coffee could. But the truth of the matter is that I like the taste, I like the smell, and I like the feeling, and that's why I do it. So it's a pure self-indulgence. I don't really need it. So therefore, yes, it is a weakness. This thing of smoking weed all the time is a little bit more of a bugbear of mine, and I'll tell you why. But first, let me give you a background into my overall stance on drugs. My experience of drugs is fairly broad. The only things that I haven't taken are, knowingly, are heroin and crack. And it is possible that once at a party somebody might have put some crack inside of a joint. I'm really not sure. It might have just been cocaine, but there was some crackling going on. It burnt a lot and then I was extremely high. So LSD, ecstasy, ketamine, speed, cocaine, lots and lots of cocaine, weed, all done. I haven't done the other psychedelics like mushrooms, DMT, ayahuasca. I might do DMT one day. Acid, I did a lot of. All of my trips were bad between the ages of 13 and 18. I think I took acid about 20 times. And all of my trips were bad trips, but I believed that I needed to take it in order to force an enlightenment. Because of the books I'd read and because of I was confused and a kid and I wasn't being guided and I hadn't been parented properly, basically. Coke, did a lot of that for a couple of years. It was quite bad. Had a really bad habit, would start out in the morning snorting at times. That was just over 10 years ago now. Contrary to popular belief, it's actually not hard to quit Coke at all. I got a revelation when I was watching an interview with Tara Palmer Tomkinson, whose nose unfortunately caved after she gave up Coke because of the damage that she'd done to herself for years. My habit wasn't on her level. I think she was going through 300 quid's worth of Coke every day. I would have done that, but I just couldn't afford it. So being poor, actually, I think Robin Williams was the one who said cocaine is God's way of telling you that you've got too much money. I just couldn't afford that habit, otherwise I would have snorted just as much as that as well. But she actually said that she had a little black book full of names of dealers and friends who were cokeheads, and she just got rid of her little black book. And that gave me this little mini revelation of, oh shit, drugs are about context. Drugs don't occur in a vacuum. It's about your individual relationship with the drug and what it causes you to do. You can't just make blanket statements about the drugs themselves, and yet you'll say to me, but you said drugs are weakness. Yeah, it's a tongue-in-cheek, dogmatic position. I could also make the case that drugs sometimes could be recreational drugs. My use of the word drugs is the English use of the word drugs. Recreational drugs could be extremely helpful in a therapeutic context, but that my stance overall is we should use as little of them as we can get away with. We should pursue and exhaust every natural route first, and that we should use as little as we can with the drugs. So my political view of drugs is that they should be legalised. I agree absolutely with Graham Hancock's stance that it is your sovereign right as an adult human being to explore your consciousness, to alter your consciousness, and it's absolute hypocrisy to only give access people to the drugs that are taxable. You've got to consider that the tax revenue for alcohol is absolutely fucking huge, as it is for nicotine, and these, you know, are causing massively more deaths every year than recreational drugs do, as do some medical drugs. Aspirin causes far more deaths per year than ecstasy does, to a very, very high degree. And yet, I still have a sparing view of how all recreational drugs, all drugs, even medical drugs, in terms of painkillers, would always be that guy who says, no, don't take painkillers until it really hurts, take them when you really need them. And in my head I'm thinking, well, because post the zombie apocalypse that I'm praying for, you know, there won't be as much, you've got to be able to get by with less. And the sliding scale of taking painkillers is, well, I've known people who've taken painkillers preemptively because they think pain is coming. I had a student who wanted to do weight training with me, and she said to me, oh, I'll go home and I'll pop some painkillers. I said, why? Have you already got DOMs? we just finished training like 15 minutes ago. You're going to go home and take painkillers? He said, no, so it doesn't hurt later. And I'm like, please don't fucking do that. Please don't take painkillers preemptively before the pain. Just take the pain. It's only muscular soreness. Enjoy it. So I'm on this one issue. I can be very conservative on some issues like criminal exploitation. But on this issue, I'm extremely liberal and do believe in the legalising of all drugs, for a lot of very, very good reasons. I also know, from a practical point of view, it's impossible and will never happen, because the economies of the world are addicted, ironically enough, to the black market economy, and drugs are an essential part of that, which I believe is why we went into Afghanistan. To stop the Taliban from burning all the poppy fields. Afghanistan provides 90% of the poppy, of the opium, of the entire world's consumption of heroin. 90% of it comes from Afghanistan. And the Taliban, at the time that we invaded illegally Afghanistan, was burning all the fields. And now that we've taken over, this is not bullshit, go and Google this, go and Google it all. We are now back to, we have exceeded previous farming of heroin now, of opium, out of Afghanistan since we've been there. We've actually increased the farming yield since 2001. So go and Google that, please, feel free. We're doing a great job over there of supplying the world with heroin. So that's my stance, but my view on taking drugs and this kind of thing is a problem that I have, and it's to do with a very simple therapeutic concept called black and white thinking, or I've started calling it binary thinking. It's either yes or no, it's either a 0 or a 1, it's either this or that. So we have the anti-drugs movement, which is full of massive amounts of stupidity, dogma, lies. They will just fall back to just fucking simply telling lies about what drugs do and don't do. One of the biggest ones, of course, is the idea that I don't think anybody really believes nowadays, but that was propagated when I was a kid in the 90s, was that if you smoke marijuana, it's a slippery slope to heroin. That's simply not possible. I mean, only a context, an environment could provide a slippery slope to, very, very hard drugs. Another one of the lies is that if you're on heroin, you're a tramp pooping himself and living in the street, ranting at people and screaming at the buses as they drive by. And actually the truth is that there are many high functioning heroin addicts who carry on a perfectly normal life for years and years and years. So we shouldn't hide these truths from people. We should tell the absolute truth from the beginning to the end, from the in to the out, of exactly what drugs are. We should educate kids on the real truth of exactly what drugs are, what they do, what they don't do. And that includes the other side of the argument, which is then in a reaction to the anti-drug stance, there's a pro-drug stance, and many of my heroes have adopted an excessively pro-drug stance. Bill Hicks, Robert Anton Wilson, Timothy Leary, Aleister Crowley, all of these people, Joe Rogan, not Graham Hancock, have all adopted an excessively pro-drug stance. When I say these people are my heroes, that is not without reservation. When I say I really like Zizek or McKenna, it's not without reservation. I think it was Aristotle that said it is the It's evidence of a clear thinker to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it in its totality. You know, I like Slavoj Žižek, but I am a capitalist, I am not a communist, ultimately at a political level. So I don't take anything that they say wholeheartedly and without question. That would be foolish. But so you get this pro-drug stance where it's like, well, it's cool to be pro-drugs. And I remember somebody on Facebook, another instructor actually, tagging me on this thing about how wonderful marijuana is, and I said, please don't tag me and stuff like this isn't my stance. And he was like, oh bro, I just assumed you were a weed smoker. And I was like, no, I never touched the stuff. It's not, you know, it's not really my cup of tea. It's not the kind of high I like as a personality. I like speed, I like coke. I don't like stuff that, you know, sort of slows everything down and softens it. Occasionally I've enjoyed smoking a little bit of weed. If you sat around having a chat with people and it's a type of weed, there seems to be types of weed that are quite social and chatty, then that can be fun, but it's not a big pull for me. But he just assumed, because of the way I am, he's like, oh, I just assumed you'd be pro-weed. And I'm like, no, I've got a neutral stance on it. It is what it is. Now here we come to the rub that pisses everybody off, is the people saying it's harmless. Okay, and what's the usual dogma that goes with that? The usual narrative that goes with that is that it's natural and it grows in the ground. So fucking what? So does cocaine. You go, no it doesn't, it's a powder. Okay, in order to smoke weed, which grows in the ground, it has to be treated, and that treatment is complicated and lengthy. I know this because one of my friends, he's a career weed maker, and his name is, and his address is, lol. And it's a science. I've been and I've seen and I've spoken to him, and in order to successfully grow these different crops and hybrids and all the rest of it, you've really got to be intelligent. Which is something I've always said about the mass media's representation of the drug scene, the drugs culture and drug dealers. Drug dealers are usually portrayed as moronic thugs, and I've always maintained you couldn't be a moron. You could not be a moron and be in that game. A moron as in you couldn't be extremely low IQ and be in that game. You wouldn't survive. You wouldn't make any money. It's just not possible. So these guys are actually quite smart. I'm not saying that because we should venerate them. I'm just saying tell the truth about what that fucking situation is. Now the same thing with cocaine. Cocaine grows in the ground. Cocaine comes from coca leaves, and it grows in the ground, and there's a lengthy process that you have to go through in order to make it consumable and turn it into a white powder that you can shove up your nose. Yes. Is it as lengthy as marijuana? No. But I don't think you can chew marijuana leaves and get high. In fact, I don't even think it's the leaves that get you high. But with coca, you can. And they do. The indigenous tribes of South America do chew coca leaves and get like a little buzz off it. Up there in the mountains, rubbing their gums and telling each other stories in a slightly over-intense way. I was fucking hunting this puma, right? And it was fucking huge. No, listen to me. And everybody else in the tribe is like, will you shut the fuck up about the puma, lad? So that is a spurious argument. It's irrelevant that it occurs naturally. It's neither here nor there that it occurs naturally. And the other idea is that it's harmless. It's not harmless. In the same way that your PlayStation isn't harmless, in the same way that Red Bull isn't harmless. Just recently I read a case of a girl who killed herself by drinking Red Bull, but she was drinking 12 tins of the stuff a day. It's just a massive amount of syrup and sugar and caffeine to ingest into the body, and it will kill you. There was the tragic case in the UK of Leah Betts, who was the first person to die from taking ecstasy. Well, she didn't die from taking ecstasy. She actually died because she was so terrified of dehydrating on the ecstasy that she overhydrated and her brain swelled up, and that's what killed her. The ecstasy had nothing to do. The ecstasy only had something to do with it to the extent of her psychological response to the drug. So here's my point. I'm not going to talk to you about how if you smoke weed, you've got to breathe it into your lungs and it's going to hurt your lungs. Everybody knows that. There is the memory loss issue. I personally don't like anything that slows my cognitive processes. My grasp on reality is slight enough, thank you very much. I struggle enough to remember what the hell's going on anyway. So there is that issue. But what I have seen and what I've experienced firsthand, time and again, is people who could do something with their lives who didn't because they were smoking weed. Now, it would be dogmatic for me to say, well, then everybody who smokes weed is going to become an apathetic person who squanders their abilities and their opportunities. But my point is this: it's not binary. It's not totally harmless and completely helpful in every way, nor is it, gonna make you fuck your life up and become a junkie within like 2 weeks because we're on a slippery slope. But we have to tell the truth. So when people are like, oh, it's great, it's awesome, it's really, really good, people should take it, I say no, you shouldn't. Drugs are weakness. All drugs are a weakness. None of them are required in order to get through life. Not really. Not really. There's nothing as a recreational drug that you need. I think that people take them because they're in pain most of the time, because we live in a shitty format. We live in what I'm starting to think nowadays is almost a hellish setup. And so when you go to the UK and you see the clubs fill up at the weekend, Friday and Saturday nights, as I did for 10 years, watching people just get smashed out of their brains for 2 nights a week and get high on really shitty, badly cut cocaine and drop pills and then all the rest of it, and then they fill up the accident and emergency department. That is as a result of a desire to release the pressure of a really shitty, really miserable lifestyle in which everybody intrinsically feels beneath the skin at an intuitive level that they're being ripped off, which they are. We are nations of absolute slaves. We have nothing but the merest fragment of an illusion of any kind of freedom, and we are absolutely fully invaded and exploited at the deepest psychic levels, and that is what causes this desperate need to get out of the mind, to get out of the self, to get smashed. The worst place I saw this doing nightclub security was in Tenerife. I worked for a season in Tenerife. That was an eye-opener, where you had people from all over the UK, mainly from industrial towns, as Tenerife is a lower budget option. Scousers, Geordies, Cockneys, Glaswegians, Brummies, all getting together, and they have their week, the 1 week out of the year of freedom. Freedom to do what? As Zizek would say, the freedom to experience excess, and they'll just get smashed and then fight because they're angry, because they're pissed off, because they're being used, because they're animals trapped inside of cages that are too small for them. Where does weed fit into this? Weed obviously doesn't form the same function, and nobody, least of all me, would ever put weed and alcohol in the same category. If clubs were full of marijuana and marijuana related drugs, like I believe, like marijuana cakes, marijuana drinks, like a booth where you could put a coin in and then just like take a hit, nobody would fight. Very, very few people would fight. It's hard to want to fight when you're on weed, when you're high on weed. It's hard to fight when you're on weed. It's hard to fucking, go to the petrol station and buy a packet of Doritos when you're on weed, but delicious if you've accomplished the mission. So I'm not, I wouldn't conflate the two, and I wouldn't say that alcohol is infinitely worse than marijuana. It's an awful, disgusting, dirty, demeaning, degrading, violence-inducing, social order corrupting drug that kills millions of people every year, where weed does not. But to my friends who have a brain, I know that you want to numb the pain of an isolated and difficult existence. My young friend, the young friend from the gym who's exploring Hinduism whilst high on weed, has similar problems. He's smart and he looks around and he knows the world is quite fucked, and that makes him feel sad, and it makes him want to stay at home and play PlayStation and get high. And I understand the effects are that it can make you feel okay with nothing. I think it was Cheech and Chong that said, it's easier to get through a period of plenty of weed with no money than it is to get through a period of money but no weed. So you can actually get by much better if you're high. Well, I can't because I don't like the stuff, but people who are really into pot can. So just sitting around with your friends playing cards and listening to music, if you're all high, suddenly becomes a really fulfilling, interesting experience. The music sounds better, the Doritos taste tastier, the card game is way more fascinating because you're blitzed. I get it, I understand, but it's the opportunity cost that bothers me, and I am not some fucking pro-fitness gym rat, fascist demanding that everybody fucking stop smoking weed and just go to the gym instead. But at the same time, a lot of the effects that you're looking for you would get by training more. Plus you'd get the added ego buzz of the self-esteem that comes with that. So when people defend their weed usage, it's usually from a place of misery. I can hear the misery and I can hear the sadness in their voice and I can see the sadness in their eyes. I'm not saying don't do it, I'm saying it's your body, it's your brain, do whatever you like, but you need dickheads like me saying it's weakness, standing over your shoulder going, you smoking up again, you fucking pothead hippie, you useless, worthless loser, to aggravate you. And to the extent to which it makes you feel bad is the extent to which you already feel bad about the issue. When I was heavy into cocaine, if you came up to me and said, you fucking cokehead, loser, baghead, junkie, worthless scumbag, I wouldn't go, hey, what you don't realise is cocaine really helps me think, and like if I need to write something creatively because I'm a creative, it actually helps me to do that, which it does, but I wouldn't say that. I'd go, you're right. It's shit. It's soul destroying, it's demeaning, it's awful, it's dehumanizing, it's a terrible, terrible drug. I hate using it, and I hate myself for using it, but at the same time, I love the way it makes me feel. And what I wasn't saying, which if I had known to say would have helped me give up a lot quicker, was I am simply bored of my own life. I snorted coke out of boredom. I was bored. I had a day job as an area manager for a security firm. I ran the Jarvis construction company contract in the UK, which will mean nothing to anybody outside of the education or the security industry, but they had one of the largest contracts ever given in the United Kingdom to do most of the schools in the UK. It was a huge contract, boring. I worked 3 nights a week as a head doorman of one of the most salubrious clubs in Liverpool, and was bored. I was totally fucking bored. And so I snorted drugs because, I don't know, just to get something. I was bored and wanted stimulation. It's one of the reasons why I say with the weed, just be careful, what is it that you're actually looking for? Do you feel isolated, you want to numb the pain of isolation? Maybe we should connect. Talk to me. Talk to each other. You know, connect like via the YouTube channels, connect via the Facebook pages. One of the things that I've noticed with, I've got a picture on my Facebook, on my profile page, from 2008, and it's of somebody snorting the word Facebook, but it's written in white powder and it's supposed to look like Coke. And I thought it was a very funny picture because I was like, this is what Facebook is. It's an addiction. What are we all doing here? Like, there's a slightly sweaty, hysterical vibe to what's going on. Obviously now other people have broken it down for me, and I listened to Charlie Brooker talk about it, I listened to Zizek talk about it, and I'm like, oh, okay, the capital that Facebook runs on is competition. It's a neurotic drive towards materialism to establish where we are in the social pecking order. It does something to the monkey mind that releases dopamine. Okay, fine. But I knew it was an addiction, and I was addicted. I had running an online business, and I'd fucking open Facebook before I opened my emails. The emails would show me where the money was that allowed me to put fuel in the car and pay my rent, but I go to Facebook first to see what foolishness was written there. So I knew it was an addiction. What we often do with addictions is we try and replace something that we're really going for with something that is second best. Facebook is no replacement for the sense of connection and the ability to communicate with people that I get from doing this, or that I get from working with clients. It's a completely different, and it's like, Facebook is nothing compared to this. It's a much, much stronger, much, much deeper connection. So in terms of it being a drug, it's a much better quality drug. I always wonder with all of the drugs, what are we replacing? You know, the alcohol that people consume, is it because boys and girls feel a little bit shy, they're secretly hoping, they're lonely, they're secretly hoping to find a partner, or maybe even just sex, and they think that if they get drunk enough, then they might be disinhibited enough to overcome their shyness to actually do something stupid and go home with somebody they don't know and have sex with them? And the answer to that question, you know it and I know it, is yes. If you took away sexual tension, would bars even open? Would we even be able to sell a drink? If what was going on in the bars was like, this is a ridiculous example, but please bear with me, I'm going a bit Zizek again here, was just a mass orgy, would people drink much during the orgy? Well, what for? You're already having the sex that you came here for. The drink is only going to diminish your performance and enjoyment. It would be strange, wouldn't it, if like, well, we're already fucking. So like, oh, I know what I need to enjoy this more, 3 pints of cider, that's going to make this sex, right? It's a silly example, I know, but sometimes it's good to have cartoonish imagery inside your mind to get that. I do think alcohol is run on sexual tension. And I think that the clubs, it's a shell game. Nightclubs are a shell game, where the only people who win are the breweries and the government who are taxing the breweries. You could say the club owners. There are some rich club owners out there, but a lot of it is a lot of hassle. It's a lot of hassle. Certainly security ain't winning. But the point of having a box, a room, which is simply a place where the lights are turned down low and the music is put on really loud, and they even fire out dry ice, and then they give you drinks that further dampen your senses. Well, if you're an alien down from some hyper-intelligent place in the universe observing that, you'd think, this is the equivalent of hitting yourself in the head with a hammer to get a concussion so that you sense less and become senseless, so that you can do things that you do want to do but you don't because you're all conflicted. And you just be like, you fucking humans are weird, man. Seriously, guys, what the fuck are you doing? This is really weird. Nightclubs are sensory deprivation tanks. You know, when you torture people, that's what you do to them. You blindfold them, you play really loud music, you keep them standing up in awkward positions for hours on end. There's like this, I was listening to a Graham Hancock interview the other day because I wanted to hear him say again why he gave up weed. Graham Hancock had a daily weed habit, and drinking the ayahuasca, he had a revelation doing the ayahuasca, and the ayahuasca said to him, you need to give up weed. It's not right for you. He was not saying it's not that everybody needs to give up. That is not what Graham Hancock is saying. He said the ayahuasca told him it's not right for you. Your individual relationship with this drug is not good for you. So I'm not saying don't smoke weed because of that. That is not what I'm saying. I'm now telling a separate story about Graham Hancock. He didn't. He carried on smoking the weed, and he said he just got more and more miserable. He went back and did ayahuasca again, and the ayahuasca like got hold of him and went, listen, fucker. Like he said it kicked his ass, and was like, you really, and he was like, oh, okay, okay, this time I'll stop. And he said his life vastly improved as a result of that. So it's not just the drug, it's the context, and it's the individual. Well, the individual makes part of the context. So I don't say weed is bad. I don't say drugs are bad. At no point will you hear me say drugs are bad. I say drugs are weakness. And weakness is a very specific word. Weakness is a word which will inflame men where it won't inflame women. Because me as a man saying to you, you doing that as a weakness is a direct challenge to your masculinity. Which I want you to take it as that. Because what does weed encourage you to do? Stay in and eat delicious salty carbohydrates which increase your estrogen levels, make you, like, the whole process will make you less outgoing, less competitive, less testosterone-y, less socialized. You know, do it, but just don't fucking overdo it. We all have addictions. I got addicted to Call of Duty Zombies recently. What an amazing game that is. Black Ops, man. Playing it for 2 hours at a time. I gave it back to my friend, who's that young chap from the gym I was talking about before. So I'm berating him for an addiction, and then he gives me something which becomes an addiction for me. And you could say, well, this is pedantic, you're talking about drugs. And I'm like, no, I'm not being pedantic, because it's still a drug. That game, and by the way, Call of Duty Black Ops Zombies has been designed by people who really, really fucking understand psychology. In terms of designing a game where you say, how can we keep people playing this fucking stupid game as long as possible? They hit so many different psychological buttons to keep you in the game. And I love that. I love like playing it and going, wow, they're so clever, they're so smart. Even as I'm sat there vegetating for an hour and a half, the only thing I'm working is these. And I go and have nightmares about zombies. So I gave it back to him. I was like, fucking take this shit back, man. So I'm not being like preachy, but I am being challenging, and I'm being challenging hopefully for a purpose, not just to troll, because there's no point to that. If you do smoke weed a lot, just look at it and say, okay, am I smoking, do I need to smoke this much? Could I cut it down? Could I do, like, you know, a couple of nights a week, maybe do something else with my time? And I guess like there is anecdotal evidence of friends that I've got who had opportunities and just blew them because of their use of weed, not because of weed, but because their relationship with that particular drug was that it made them say, fuck it, I can't be arsed. I had a guy who's a really good musician. He's played as a support act at Wembley Arena, toured with the Coral and with the Arctic Monkeys. You know, they're fucking famous in the UK at least. And then sacked it all off and went back to his job as a used car salesman. And he himself will say it was because of weed, because he didn't have that. It's tough to get anywhere in the music industry nowadays, as I understand it, as people tell me, and he didn't have the drive to hustle. And I was like, you really got to be hustling, you got to be really forming relationships with club managers and all of that. And he said, mate, I know, I can't be fucked. And I was like, fair enough. So I've seen that. I've seen really good martial artists who spewed their martial arts ability because they chose weed instead. So there you go. That's a little bit rambling, but I hope it made sense. My stance, generally speaking, is you should avoid it. One final thing that I will say is, if any of you are hoping to get coaching from me, do not ask me for a coaching session if you have a hangover or you've taken drugs for the last 48 hours, because you're wasting your money if you do that. Because I want to work with you, the sober you. Me, I can't work with drunk you, high you, or come down you. Because come down you is going to be depressed and anxious, and you'll be like, oh, I'm depressed and anxious, and I'll go, oh, I'll start forming a picture going, oh, this client has a depression and anxiety issue, when you don't. You're just just tired, sleep deprived, and too much alcohol in the system, and you know, drugs and stuff, which will make you emotional and paranoid. Okay guys, that's it for that. Thank you very much for your time and attention, which are two of the most precious resources you have. Please don't waste them. Please do everything you can to improve the quality of them. Thank you.